Hello and welcome to Good Harvest. This is part 9 of our eLife web series where we show you how to design a simple yet appealing footer, and we also use JavaScript to create a navigation bar, UI scrolling effect where a box shadow appears when a user scrolls down and disappears when the user scrolls back to the top. Stay tuned by subscribing to our channel because in part 10 of our eLife web series, which is the last video demonstrating the creation of eLife product page, we show you how to make the product page responsive. Now if you're new here, this is a part of our step-by-step tutorial video on how to create a product page for an e-commerce website using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Check out the full playlist with all parts in the description or top comment down below. Subscribe to Good Harvest, and now let's get started. Alright, so since the footer will be placed after the body tag, we're going to scroll down, but we don't need to scroll all the way down because we have multiple lines of code. We can just head over to our product page, end of body, and we will first include the footer tag. So this will automatically place all the elements in the footer on the bottom of the product page. So now let's create a div. So this footer will be separated. We'll have two sections. The first section will be the top footer, and the second section will be the bottom footer. So we're going to create an ID for the first one, and we'll call it footer top. And we'll create another div for the footer bottom. Alright, so for the footer top, we're also going to have two sections. So the first section will include the image, which is basically a large picture of, or a large image of the eLife logo. And then we'll have the social media links. So first, for the image, we're going to include the image tag, include the source, so where the file path is, where it is located in your file. So for me, I've kept it in the images folder, and I've named it eLife PNG. I've also used it for the navigation bar over here. So we're going to use that same image for the footer. The only thing is we're going to change the width and height, but first let's include the alternative text. So this is for when the image has not yet been uploaded, has not yet loaded, then we can tell the user that the image that is supposed to be displayed is the eLife logo, as simple as that. And then the width and height, you can either define it in the CSS file or here. But since the image has a width and a height attribute, we'll just type it in the HTML file. And we want it to be slightly bigger than the image that we kept in the navigation bar. So we'll keep it at 120 pixels in width and 110 by height. So since the image is rather wider than longer, the width is double the size of the height. So now we're going to be creating another div, and we're going to create a wrapper because we're going to include 3 elements or 3 items inside this wrapper. So we'll first create an ID for this div, and we will call it footer socials wrapper. Now we're going to once again include 3 social media links. First one will be just a mobile number, the second will be a Telegram, and third will be Twitter. So each of them will have the same class, and we're going to call this class footer social. And we have used a class for this because we're going to use it more than once, but for an ID you only use it once. For a class, you can use more than once for other elements, for example. So in our class, we're going to, for each, all of them will have one SVG, showing what type of social media link it is, and then the link.svg. So we're going to use Bootstrap, and the first one that we're going to include is the mobile number. So we're going to use Bootstrap to get an icon of a telephone. So over here we can just write telephone, and we'll get the one that's filled, not outlined. And then when we scroll down, we can see copy HTML. Then let's head over back to our VS Code HTML file and include our SVG path. Now we're also going to include a span element where we store the text that is, which describes basically what social media link it is. So this one is not a social media link, it's just, the number in which you contact the company. So we're just going to type in 01234567889. And this one will be the only one with a span element. The rest will have an anchor tag because they're going to be linked to the eLife social media page. So now we're going to copy this and paste it 2 more times. So the next one is going to be Telegram, and the last one will be Twitter. So you can choose any type of social media link or platform that you want to include. Now each of them will have a 40 pixels in width and height. And now let's change the SVGs for the Telegram platform and the Twitter platform. And now let's change the width and height attributes, and we'll set it to 40 pixels. And now when we check our footer page, we can see that the footer top section is completed. Obviously, it's not been designed yet. We have no background color. Here they're all in one column rather than in a row, but that's fine. We're going to change that later. So now we're going to be including the footer bottom attributes. But before that, we need to change the Telegram and Twitter elements. So since they're going to be links, we're going to include an anchor tag linking to where the eLife platform is. So since this is just for demonstration, I'll just put a hashtag. Now, if you're creating an actual website, you'll have to include https, a colon, and 2 slashes, www, and then the name of the website.com. And we'll also do the same for the Twitter tag. So now when we scroll down and let's say we click on Telegram, you can see it leads us to the Telegram page. So it does not work if you do not include this section of the URL nor the ending of the URL here.com. Alright, so now we're going to be designing the footer bottom. So for our footer bottom, we're going to be adding 2 elements. So it's going to be separated into 2 sections as well. The first section will include all of the website's links. So for example, home, product, services, and about. And then the second section will include the copyright text. So for all the links, we're going to be storing them in one container, in one element, and we'll use the unordered list element. And then each of these links will be stored in a list item, which is really important. And because they are links, we're also going to be adding anchor tags for this. So because we've already created our homepage, we can link it to the name of the homepage. And if you have not created that yet, please do check out the homepage with the link in the description down below. And we will do the same for the other links. So for example, for products, we'll use the name that we create, the name of the HTML page in which our product page is. However, because we have not created the services and about page yet, we'll just leave a hashtag, which basically does not do anything, so it just leads us to a section of the page. And programmers usually use a hashtag symbol when, for example, a site has not yet been developed. And now the last part of our footer top will be our paragraph text, which is the copyright text. So usually there's always a symbol right after between the copyright text and the date. So we're going to head over to Google and search for the copyright symbol, and we'll just take it from here. Alright, so now we are done with including all of our elements for the footer. So now we're going to be designing it and making sure that it looks styled, simple, yet appealing. Alright, so now let's head over to our CSS file, and as always, because we need to navigate through our CSS file better, because we have a lot of lines and a lot of sections, we'll have to create a comment so that when we want to look for a particular section or particular element in the CSS file, we can just use the search function in order to find where that element is through the comment or through the name of the element or through the name of the section in which we have included in our comment. So now we're going to be designing the footer, as that is the first element that we included. So we want the background color of our footer to be a slightly light blue, so almost a similar shade to this code that we added for our product card, but not exactly the same. So we're going to use this color combination of D9, E5, F4. So it looks slightly duller than the color that we used for the product page, but sort of similar. Now we want to make sure that all of our elements are positioned to the center of the footer. So we are going to either use text align center that will center everything, or if we get rid of that, we can also use display flex. And because maybe we want everything to be in one column, so the footer, because the footer's child elements are the footer top and the footer bottom, so the flex direction, so the footer top and the footer bottom specifically will be affected by the flex direction. So we want it to be in a column, and then we also want to make sure that all of our items are placed towards the center, so that will keep everything towards the center as well. But because we can use one line to center everything, we can use text align center. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to create spacing between the edge of the footer and the elements within. So there should be spacing between, for example, the logo and the edge of the footer. So we're going to add a padding space of 30 pixels. Then we want all of our elements, all of the text in our element in the footer to be dark gray. So we're going to set the value of 6664, which we've also used throughout this site. And then we'll include margin top properties so that we can create spacing between the product cards container and the footer itself. So we're going to set this to 90 pixels. So now our footer looks a little better than before. So now we're going to be designing the footer top, which is an ID. So because it is an ID, we have to use the hashtag identifier. Now we want to create some padding space inside the padding top section. So the padding top section is basically all of this from here to here. We want to create some spacing in between, which will also create spacing between the footer top and the footer bottom. Then we want to make sure that all of our elements are only cover 60% of the footer. So that's basically like the same thing as adding a lot of padding space, but only towards the left and the right. But we don't want to add a large amount of padding space. So instead, you can just set the width value and you can set it to be 60% of. So that's probably around here, I assume. So somewhere around here. But we're going to have to center this. We're going to have to move this to the center of the page. So it will only cover 60% of the footer. So it's kind of the same as adding the spacing between the footer top and the edge of the footer. Now, in order to position the footer top to the center, we'll have to use this property called margin auto. So now it's back to the center. Now the next thing is the footer socials wrapper, which basically holds all of our elements, all of our social media links. So once again, we're going to be adding spacing within this element, this container or wrapper. So it creates spacing between the logo and the footer bottom itself. So, it does not look congested. It looks more spaced out and clean. Then you can include a flex layout, which stands for flexible. And with the flexible layout, we first want to specify the flex direction. And we want everything to be in one line horizontally. So we're going to use the row value. And then we want everything to be spaced out. So we want all of the social media links to have space in between each other. So we're going to use a justified content space between in order to create that spacing between each element. So now that looks better. Now we're going to be adding a little spacing between the Evite logo and the social media links. So we're going to use margin, but specifically margin top, as we only want the spacing to be towards the top of the footer socials wrapper. And we're going to set this to 10 pixels. Alright, so now we're going to be designing the classes, so each class which each of the links have. And because it is a class, we're going to use a dot as the identifier because that is the class identifier. And we're going to make sure that everything is in one line horizontally, as in we want to make sure that it is always horizontal and not in a column. So we have to change the flex direction, and then we want to make sure that the text that is next to the SVG links are placed towards the center because right now they're towards the top, so we want it to be vertically centered. So we're going to use place items center. You can also use align items if you want to. So now that has centered everything vertically. And now we're going to be editing the span and the anchor tag itself. So we just want to specify the font size, and we want to make sure that each of these elements, the span element as well as the anchor tag, have created spacing between the element itself and the SVG link. So we're going to use margin left for this. since the SVG links are towards the left side of the text. So we're going to first pull out the container it is in, and we're going to start with the span element first, since that appears first. Then we're going to specify the font size, and we want it to be 16 pixels, and we want spacing between each of towards the text and the SVG link. So we're going to set this to margin left. Now we also want to make sure that it has a little boldness, because at the moment that is not yet specified. So we're going to set it to a font weight of 500. However, if you like it that way, then you can skip the next part. However, I feel like it's a little too thick, a little too rough, so we're going to smoothen the fonts a little too thick. So we're going to smoothen the text by using WebKit font smoothing, which we have also used before. And the value anti-alias basically smoothens the font, the lining of each letter in the text. So now that looks a little soft, a little better, which is what we want our website to look like. Now we also want to edit the anchor tags, and it's basically going to have all of the same value. So instead of repeating it twice, you can simply just copy this, remove this, and add a comma. So that will apply the same properties for these two elements. Now we want to change or add a few properties for the anchor tag specifically, because there's a text decoration that we want to remove. So which is the underline as well as the link color. So we're going to simply add in text decoration, and we're going to set that to none. And then we want the color of the text to be dark gray. So now that looks much better. Alright, so now we're going to be working on the footer bottom, which is the second section of the footer element. And because it is an ID, we're using the hashtag to select it. So for our footer bottom so it's basically holds these two elements. So the whole under list, so this is combined together as one element, and then this element is also another element in the footer bottom container. So we want to make sure that they're in one line, and we also want to make sure that they're spaced out. So first we're going to set a flexible layout so that we can do this. Then we can set the flex direction, and we want it to be horizontal, to be in one line horizontally. Then we're going to use justify content in order to space them further from each other. So now they're towards the ends of the footer. However, we also want to include a little bit of spacing between the footer bottom itself and the edge of the footer. So right here, there needs to be a little more space. So just like we did for the footer, for the social links here, we set the width to 60%. We're not going to set the footer bottom to 60%, but we're going to set it to 90%. So that will create some width of spacing. And then we just have to center this by using margin auto, so that it looks like we've added padding space. But if we added padding space, we have to use a large value. But why do that? And you can also use width as well. But you can also choose to use padding space instead. So because we only want spacing towards the left and right side of the footer bottom, not towards the top and bottom, we're going to set the vertical value to 0. So that's responsible for padding top and for padding bottom. And for the padding left and right is the second value. So we're going to, let's say you want it to be 60 pixels. But then for me, that wouldn't be enough. So maybe I'd have to set it to 100 pixels. So then that would be enough. However, the padding value is a little too high. So, but you can decide that. So for me, I will go with setting the width, reducing the width of the footer bottom, and then centering it. Now another thing is we want to include a little border at the top, specifically at the top of the footer bottom. So we're going to use border top in order to create a border, but only towards the top side. And we're going to set this to 1 pixel solid. So solid basically means the line is straight. There's no spacing in between the border. So for example, there are different values such as dotted, So if it's dotted, there'll be some holes in between or some spacing in between, or if it's dashed, same thing, maybe a little wider. So we want it to be a solid straight line without any holes in between. Then we'll set the color, which we want it to be light gray. So we'll go with the value of 169, which will create a light gray value. Now the spacing, now there is little spacing between the border and the elements inside the footer bottom. So we can add spacing between the border and the elements by using padding top, because the border top will always stay at the top. So if, for example, we add padding, the border will not have spacing in between, because the border top is always at the edge, so that will not change. However, these elements will move when we add padding space. So we're going to add a padding top of 30 pixels. So now we can see a little spacing between the border, which always stays the same, at the same position, and the elements inside. And now in order to create a little more space between the footer top and the footer bottom, we're going to use margin top, and we're going to set it to 20 pixels. Now the next part is our unordered list, so the first element in the footer bottom. So we're going to select specifically what, we're going to select the container in which the unordered list is, because if we just set it as unordered list, then it would, whatever property that we add in here would apply for all unordered lists. So probably here, navigation bar, but we do not want that. We only want the styles to apply in the container, in the footer bottom container. So we're going to specify the container it is in, and we want to make sure that there is no bullet points, so that this style should be set to none. And then we want to make sure that everything is set in one line horizontally, and to make sure that it always stays in one line and one row, we're going to use the row property. So I'm not going to rely on the defaults, just in case. So now now we're going to edit the list items, as that is inside the unordered list. So it is simply going to copy this, change it to the element that we want to style, and we want to make sure that there is spacing between all of these list items. So we're going to set spacing with margin right. We're setting it to 20 pixels. You can go with margin or padding, both will work. Then we want to edit the anchor tags, which we have included, and what we want to do is remove the text decoration. So we want to remove the underline, and we want to set the color of the anchor tag with the links to 64, so kind of the same thing that we did earlier with our social links. And we also want to include a transition property. So when we hover around, when our mouse hovers around each link, the color of the link should change. So we want to slow down that process of the color changing from dark gray, which it is now currently, to dark blue, so around this shade of blue. So we want to slow down the transition, and slowing down the transition will create a smooth effect or smooth transition. But we don't want it to slow down, by many seconds. We're just going to set it to 0.3 seconds, and we want it in both ways: when the user hovers around the mouse and around the link, and when the mouse of the user exits. So when they enter and when they exit the element. So we're going to use this property called ease in and out. So in going for hovering, and out going for when they exit. So now we're going to be adding the hover property. We're going to include the hover property, and for this we want the color to simply change. We only want the color change, and we want it to be from dark gray to blue, and we're going to go with this shade of blue. So now when we hover around our links, it should change color. Alright, so now we're going to be creating the navigation bar scrolling effect. So when we scroll up, when the user scrolls down, a box shadow should appear. And when the user scrolls back up to the top, it should disappear. When they scroll down, appear. When they scroll back to the top, it should disappear. And there should be a smooth transition as well. Alright, so when we head over to our head tag, and we head over to our script tag where we have included all of our JavaScript code, we first want to create a comment, because we want to separate the two sections. So this one deals with the product card spacing. So we used this code in order to create spacing in between each product card. So now we're going to create we're going to create a new comment, navigation scrolling effect. Alright, so now we're dealing with scrolling here, and scrolling is an event. It is an event in a page. So when someone scrolls down, we're able to listen for that event. So we're going to first call the document. So we want to listen for this scrolling effect throughout the whole document. We want to listen for a scroll, and then we want to add an event listener. And specifically, we want to listen for a scroll. So it's as simple as that. And then we want it to carry out if a user does actually scroll and their window changes, the position of their window or XY coordinates change, then a specific function should be carried out. So first we want to declare a variable, and we want to first take the navigation bar, which is what we are going to be changing the style in. So we're going to be adding the box shadow, which is a style property. So first we need to declare and select that navigation bar. So that navigation bar is kept in an element, which we have used a nav tag in order to store all of our elements in the navigation bar. So the nav element is where our navigation bar is, so we need to select this element specifically. So, but we cannot declare it in here, because here, if we declare it in here, it will have to be redeclared every time when there's no need. The variable is not changing. And if we redeclare the navigation bar value, it can create performance issues for our function, for our scrolling function. So we're going to declare it outside. Select nav bar, or any name that you'd like to choose. We want to assign it to the whole document. Select, and we want the whole document to select or search for a specific element, and that element is the nav element. So now that we have declared it in here and we've assigned it to a variable, we can now use it inside our scrolling function. So we're going to start by including an if statement. So inside this if statement, we want to check what our x and y coordinates of our window is currently. So for example, at the moment, our x and y coordinates of our window is at 0. When you scroll down, the xy coordinates has increased. Well, actually not the x coordinates, because we're not scrolling sideways, but we're scrolling downwards. So the y value is increasing, whereas the x value stays the same. So we're only listening for scroll up or scroll down. So in our if statement, we want to first call out the window. We want to get the window's x and y coordinates. So for example, we're going to use the scroll y method, because we only want to search, listen for a scrolling downwards or upwards. If it was left to right, then it would be x, then it would be scroll x. But we're only listening for a scroll downwards or upwards, vertically, so we're going to use scroll y. And we want to know and want to check and see whether the scroll y value has changed and whether it is increased and is greater than 0. So for example, at the moment, our window scroll y value is at 0, but when we scroll down, it increases. But when you scroll back up, it's back to 0. So now, if the scroll y is greater than 0, which means that we have scrolled down, then we want to include the navbar box shadow. And because it is a style property, we're going to first call out the navigation bar element. Then we are going to use the style property, and specifically we want the box shadow to change. So now we're going to set the box shadow value that we want it to be. So for our x value, we don't want the box shadow to appear left or right. So we're going to set the x value to 0. Then the next value is the y value, and we're going to set this to 5 pixels. So we want the box shadow to appear downwards by 5 pixels. So there should be a 5 pixel line. Now we want to make sure that our pixels or our box shadow is basically dispersed or has diffused, and we want it to diffuse by 20 pixels. So this kind of helps to create a transparent box shadow. Not exactly, but it sort of does. It creates a realistic shadow. Because if we kept it at 0, then it would just be a 5 pixel line. But because we have set this to 20 pixels, it will look a little more dispersed, and it will disperse by 20 pixels. Then we want to set the RGB value. So for example, let's just keep it at 0. So when you scroll down, you can see that our box shadow is a little too rough. It's not really soft, but you can see that the pixels of the box shadow has dispersed. So if it was 5 pixels, it would be from here to here, but because we have set the third value to 20 pixels, it is dispersed by 20 pixels. Now, for example, if you kept it at 0, it would just be a line. If you scroll down, it would just be a line. And that's not nice. So you can either increase or decrease based on your liking. And right now the box shadow is too dark, so we want to increase the lighting of the box shadow and make it appear a little more transparent. So we're going to set the value to 11190. So now once again, when we scroll, you can see that it looks a little better. It's not really the best just yet, so we're going to add another property, but you can see that the box shadow is starting to look like a proper box shadow. But the thing is, we want our box shadow to look a little subtle. We want the user to, the user will probably notice it, but it will be very subtle, so they might recognize it, but they won't properly notice it. Or they might not say, oh, there's a box shadow. It should be a little subtle. So now we're going to add another value over here, which we've also done before in our product cards. So we want to set the alpha value. A stands for alpha, and we want to set it to. So basically, if it was kept at 0, then the box shadow would be completely transparent, like the most transparent, completely transparent, 100% transparent. But so if we scroll down, you can see it does not appear. But if we set it at 1, then it should be, it should have 0% transparency, so it is not transparent at all. So we want it to be kept at not somewhere in the middle, because even that still feels like, a person might say, oh, there's a box shadow. We want it to be as subtle as possible. So we're going to set the value of the, how transparent it is to 0.15. So you can say this has, 100 minus 50, which is around 85. So it has a transparency of 85%. So now when you can see, when you scroll down, you can see a box shadow, but it is very, very light, which is how we want our box shadow to be or to look like. Then we're going to include an else statement. So if the user is still at the top, the window is still at the top, then the box shadow should disappear. So we're going to call out the navigation bar elements, and we're going to set the value of the box shadow to none. So that should remove the box shadow completely. Okay, so when we reload our page and when we scroll down, our box shadow appears, and it is very nice, simple, elegant, smooth. But when we scroll up, the box shadow disappears, so we've achieved our objective. Now, the last thing we want to do is we want to increase the transition, or we want to create a smooth transition from box shadow to a no box shadow, because at the moment it looks a little too abrupt, and that is not really what we want. We want our website, because the main objective of our website is to make it more minimalistic, simple, yet very elegant. And this is not really an elegant move, you could say. So we're going to scroll back up in our CSS file to where our navigation bar is. So just search for our nav elements, which is right here. And over here, we're going to add the transition property we've also used before in order to reduce the number of seconds it takes, increase the number of seconds it takes for a transition to take place. And we're going to set it to 0.3 seconds, which we've also used for the footers, change in color, as well as the navigation bar. So we're going to set this to 0.3 seconds, and we want it in both ways, in and out. So when the user scrolls down, the box shadow, you can see a little transition now, and a little smooth transition from no box shadow to box shadow. We want that to be by 0.3 seconds, and then ease out is when the box shadow already is in place and we want to take it back to none. Then the box shadow transition should still be smooth, so I want it in both ways, in and out. So now when we scroll down, we can see that it transitions elegantly and gracefully.
Alright, and now we are at the end of part 9. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button, comment down below, and subscribe to Code Harvest if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned as in the next part of the eLife web series, which is the last video demonstrating the creation of the eLife product page. We show you how to make the product page responsive. Now see you in the next video.